Alrighty then. So I think we are live, and I'm here with my new friend Brenden.
Yes, sir.
Brenden, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. It's warm here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I don't know if you know that's where I'm from, but that's where I am. And it's
Yeah.
warm, but I love the heat. I love it.
Oh goodness. Yeah. I mean, even in my apartment right now, feels like it's in the high 70s, low 80s Fahrenheit.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now. I often do this with my American guests. What the Fahrenheit is. I haven't figured out yet how to convert it. I know the formula, but I can't do it in my head. It's
Yeah.
28 Celsius, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
28 C to F. Do you have a guess for what that might be?
Oh no.
82.4.
Temperature's been a bad one.
82.4 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And the high today was about 90 Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm curious. I'm gonna look this up. You said Montreal. I actually didn't know you were in Montreal.
Yeah, you know
Uh,
you know the
it
city?
is. Oh, it's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
The Basilica de Notre Dame in Montreal is one of my favorite cathedrals, and
Ah.
I'm not untraveled.
Ah.
Yeah, the high today was 92, but then it drops apparently tomorrow. It's going to be like, yeah, 80s. Yeah,
Comfortable tomorrow.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about you. I don't think you know anything about me, but our friends at the Colby Center hooked us up so we could chat. My podcast is very informal. It's just get to know you kind of thing. And if you want to talk about, theology or philosophy, that's fun for me, but we'll see how it goes. But the first step is always to talk about yourself and your childhood in particular. How were you raised? What
Sure.
kind of influences were in there? And what happened, from before the age of reason, where you were just impressionable, getting impressions about God and religion, up until, today, including what happened during puberty. That's always fun to hear what if you went into the dark side or anything.
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in a classic, you know, Texas environment. We went to a fundamentalist evangelical church, very, very Protestant. Um, and we switched at one point for a couple of years to Presbyterian, but not when I was in like it was in I think we left in like early middle school for me, right? So not in sort of my like formative years for my theology. Um, but yeah, I grew up. My family is very very religious, and so I was involved with. I don't know if you know what any of these are, but I was involved with Awana. I was involved with VBS every year. So VBS is Vacation Bible School, right? So every summer for a week, it's a like morning to afternoon, almost like camp thing. Like you go to it and it's just all Bible, right? Awana is all about like Bible memorization. I did Bible quizzing, right? Like it, learn like I my family was very very religious, and so I took it seriously. I'm the oldest of a family of four. I have three younger sisters, and let me think. What else would have been formative growing up? I was homeschooled K
Ah.
through 12,
Oh, wow.
uh, and my mom did in-home childcare for income, and so always children around. Always, my dad was a cop, and so his hours were always weird. Um, Definitely a lot of the very standard like American police mentality with some of that. So um, grew up kind of in that environment. Really, really started taking my faith seriously in high school. Um, Doubled down. So the church we were going to, I don't know how well you know Protestant theologians, big names of Protestant. A guy named John MacArthur.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. John MacArthur.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
John MacArthur. Yeah. How do I know him? Is it possible that I heard him on the AM radio? Is that possible? John MacArthur.
Probably. He did. He has master's seminary in California. His church, I can't remember the name of it, is in California. His church kind of came onto the news when it refused to do anything for the shutdown.
Oh, Grace
and
to
so
You Ministries, right?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's I've heard that on AM radio. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Cool.
he taught the guy directly, who's the pastor of the church that we grew up in,
Ah,
right? So
ah.
it's very, very conservative, very um, exclusionary, right? Like it is the church, and if another church doesn't agree with it on every point of doctrine that they consider major and they consider them all major, um, then not allowed. Like I actually had one of them at one point tell me that, you know, Jonathan Edwards was a great guy, but he wouldn't be allowed to teach at Sunday school um, because of his stance on like eschatology of all things. But anyway, so I grew up in that environment, but my dad was very questioning about certain issues, especially eschatology, actually. And so I got to learn, even though I was in a fairly like repressive, cult like, right, based off of the bite model environment, I, because dad questioned, I questioned. And so I became really hyper fixated, right? Is probably the correct term for that. And so I taught myself theology and church history. I would get into debates. I was always wanting to study and learn, even with my homeschool curriculum, which was very. I mean, the homeschool curriculum we used was young Earth, creationist, very very biblically based, American exceptionalism, all of the things you would kind of expect, right? Um, Actually, ironically, it's based out of Florida. And if you know anything about what's going on with American politics right now, it makes a lot of sense. Um, but yeah, so grew up. So in middle school, high school, really started questioning a lot of the things that the church was teaching. Things I thought were safe fields to question, though. Like I was always a little too trepidatious to touch on like faith versus works or you know, any of the like foundational solas. Um, but I didn't believe that the rapture was going to come, take the Christians away, and then the tribulation was going to happen, right? Thought that was ridiculous. Went to try and find it in the Bible because they always taught it with such
Mm.
fervor. Couldn't find anything. In fact, the one of their proof texts literally says, and then after the tribulation, and then says the thing they're trying to say is going to happen. I'm like, that doesn't match up. So I was very questioning of some of those things, and they did not like it. So I started becoming a bit of, I don't know, I had a group of friends. We were all the like nerdy scholastic ones, but I started to become a bit of a pariah with the leadership. Um, Graduated high school, got my associate's degree. Um, Tried to go to the military. It didn't work out for PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder reasons. It turns out when you have a cop for a dad, and then you go into an environment where a petty officer is yelling, screaming, throwing things, getting in your face, flashbacks can happen, apparently. So came back home, rethinking my life, and was more or less told I would never be allowed to serve at the church I was at. It seemed like they were fine with not confronting me when they thought I was leaving. When I came back, they made it clear that yeah, I can take a sideline position, but no leadership, no service, things like that. So I left that church, and it was difficult because family still went there, and it's a fairly cult-like environment. So I lost most of my friends. Didn't really feel like I could talk to my family about what was going on. Started trying to find another church, and about this time really started to deep dive into ecclesiology, because how are you supposed to find a church if you don't know what the church is supposed to look like, right? And everything that I found scripturally and historically about how a church is supposed to be run contradicted everything I saw in every Protestant church I went to. So, that made it difficult. So there was a period of time then when I was getting my bachelor's degree where I just wasn't acting Christian at all, right? Like, I still would have said that I was, but only going to church because clearly none of these churches are true. And I grew up conservative. You can't be Catholic or Orthodox. They're bad as the atheists. Yeah, so just really didn't know what to do, so I just kind of ignored religion for a while. That cognitive dissonance, right? Just I got over it by not dealing with it. Graduated with my bachelor's degree in the process. Well, two of them. I have a couple. My last semester at my bachelor's, I was a bartender for weddings. One of the weddings I worked was a Catholic wedding. One of the guys at the wedding found out that I knew Latin because that was part of my bachelor's studies. Knew that I knew church history because of personal study. Invited me to go grab beers with them. I started hanging out with them and we started talking. And as they explained Catholicism, number one, it addressed a lot of the issues I've been having with the Protestant church. And number two, I'd realized a lot of what I thought Catholicism were just straw men. So got super excited, worked to become Catholic, became Catholic, got confirmed, and was hardcore Latin mass, conservative, not the full-on rad trad.
Okay.
Right, like I didn't go that far. I liked the Latin mass because I knew Latin, yeah, I got pretty, like, I had a good conservative group of friends. Ended up making a few more charismatic friends, even like
Charismatic Catholic?
yeah.
Cool.
Even ended up engaged.
Oh.
Met a Catholic girl, got engaged, and things were kind of rocky, and then they were kind of okay, and then they got kind of rocky, and then it got more rocky, and so that ended up falling through. The engagement just didn't work out. We couldn't see eye to eye on how to deal with some of the issues in the relationship. So, and then let's see. So that was in. Meanwhile, I'm a teacher at the time, right? So like I graduated from college with 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 minors, 2 certificates. Got a job as a school teacher. And it was my 3rd year of teaching. And there was kind of a whole avalanche of things that just kind of went wrong that year. It was so engagement fell through. My grandfather, who I was very close to, got COVID, and started doing really poorly. And so they were going to intubate him. They gave him maybe a 30% chance. And so we were going to have a phone call with him before they put him under. So we all get to my parents' house to have this video call. And mom sets us down ahead of time and is like, hey, I got results back from the doctor earlier today and I have cancer. So that was, dealt with both of those. Because of that, my work suffered, right, as I'm trying to emotionally deal with, because my grandfather ended up passing a few days later. So while emotionally trying to deal with both of those, the headmaster at my work didn't like me anyways because I was very on top of her for some shady things that were going down at the school I was at. And so she used this opportunity to push me out. And, eventually just really, really just kind of bullied me out of the position. And so I found myself kind of in a position then when I was like, all right, I have to rethink my life's goals. I have to rethink my career. I suddenly had a lot more free time. I'm not working. Um, and so I really took that time to deconstruct kind of everything. Right. And I didn't mean to. It started with like, since I had more free time, I was listening more podcasts and things like that. I just had a couple of small questions. And I found when I started pulling at those small questions, they didn't get answered. They got bigger and they led to more. Um, and the more I searched and the more I really tried to understand the truth, um, the more it led me away from Christianity. And I really tried to do my absolute best to look into everything, right? I dove into philosophy, right? Can we know that God exists without revelation? Dove into personal experiences, right? All these people who have good religious feelings, who have experienced miracles, right? What do we do with those? I dove into the Old Testament, right? How can we, like, can we see this as, is it reliable? Is it historically true? Is it trustworthy? Dove into the New Testament, same questions. And by the end of all of that, I walked away going, I'm not convinced. I don't find the evidence convincing for theism, and in fact, I find quite a few issues with Christianity specifically, right? So like, kind of entered into a period where I'd say I'm agnostic, but I know these aren't true, and they'd be Judaism, Christianity, Islam, but didn't want to be wrong about that. So that was year and a half ago. Yeah, a year and a half ago. And since then, I've still just been involved with just trying to gain as much information as I can. I've learned a lot more since then. I like doing debates, which is how I found the Colby Center. That was kind of a mutual friend thing. And I really my philosophy. I was a school teacher, right? Like my philosophy on life is that I want to believe the most true things and the fewest false things possible. I want to help other people do the same, and that the best way to reach that is to interact with as much data and information as you can and talk to people, because if you're missing something, they can point it out. And so that's what I've been doing. And that's more or less what's led to where I'm at now, and being on the podcast, actually.
Pretty good. I got a couple of rapid fire questions for you, okay?
Let's do it.
Do you know my friend Kev Non-Trad Cat?
Say it one more time.
Kev Non-Trad Cat. He's an ex-traditional Catholic. His name's Kevin. I think
no.
you'd get along now. He's an atheist of some sort, and
Okay.
or an agnostic of some sort. But he's a nice
Yeah,
guy. He's been on my show once before. He's going to be on again on Sunday, and I just get the vibe like you two would be kindred spirits. Cool guy and easygoing guy, friendly guy, likable guy, like you. Okay. So I'll hook you two up. You can chat.
Appreciate it.
What's your age and ethnicity if you're not shy to tell us?
28, and I'm about as Caucasian as you can get.
You don't know the specifics? Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, whatever?
Yeah, so my family's primarily on my dad's side out of Germany, and on my mom's side it's primarily out of Ireland, England, but I don't know anything about my dad's side. I'm half adopted, and on my mom's side, we have records going back to the American Revolution, so there's not really any ethnic pride there, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much the same, like the British Isles, whatever, Great Britain, and a bit of German, Scandinavian, and that regional, just whatever was in that region, basically. What are your degrees and what are you teaching, and what age groups do you teach?
Yeah, so I have a degree, a bachelor's degree in English literature with a minor in religious studies and a certificate in medieval and Renaissance studies. And then I have a bachelor's degree in history with a focus on Roman history, a minor in Latin, and a certificate in Jewish and Israel studies. So I really focus hard on the first century for history and in medieval for literature.
Exciting. Wow, that's
Oh, I
fun.
love it.
I thought you had done classics or something like that. You know, the classics program.
I mean, so UNT doesn't have the school I went to doesn't have a great classics program. They're trying to build it up. So what I did was I just built one for myself, right? So
Yeah.
like a degree in history focused on Roman, religion studies focused on like first century, um, the Latin minor, right? Like I more or less I put together a classics degree for myself at a school that didn't offer it officially.
Very cool. We're going to come back to that and to, you know, your favorite philosophers and all that sort of stuff. But
Oh
right now, I
yes.
just want to ask some quick fire questions again about your siblings. What's their faith journey like? If you're allowed to talk about it, just in rough overview. Your four.
Yeah, my whole family still goes to the church I grew up in,
Okay.
except my sister who's married now. They officially go to a like plant church, so it's essentially the same thing.
Okay.
Um, Unofficially, they don't really go much, but still believe
Okay.
more or less everything that's taught there.
Okay. Um, so I guess now we can dig in a little bit more into, you know, your interests today. And, you know, I want to ask you, okay, let me just ask it since I sort of touched on it, hinted at it. What about your favorite philosophers? Like, were you attracted by the pre-Socratics and then Socrates, Plato, Aristotle? Were they a big part of your reading list at any point?
Not a big part, right? So like I read a lot of the basics. I'll say the one that really always stood out to me. I love Stoic philosophy.
Yeah, that was good. I was
Um,
leading to next after that
yeah,
period. Yeah.
yeah. Marcus Aurelius, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I mean the Stoics in general, but like Marcus Aurelius is that beautiful overlap of
Mm,
Greek philosophy with Roman history, which
mm,
was, what I focused more on myself. It's very Christian.
yeah.
Uh, like it
Cool.
seems pretty obvious that Paul was inspired, at least in part, by Stoic philosophy with some of the overlaps. And yeah, so it's comfortable. It was nice. I liked it.
It's cool. It's a very cool, you know, religion or worldview or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that was basically the heart and soul, I think, of Nietzsche's work, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what about Justin Martyr, since we're talking about that sort of early church stuff? Did you read anything about Justin Martyr or any of his works?
Bits and pieces.
Nothing springs to mind. He
Um,
didn't make a big impression.
no, not particularly. So I came to the early church fathers a little bit late.
Yeah.
Um, like I didn't really get to them till I was already Catholic because Protestants just don't talk about them much. Like I can probably talk more intelligently about the theology of Martin Luther than of
Okay.
Justin Martyr. Um, but and when I did read church fathers, what I did was kind of more of a like shotgun, read a lot of things, and the names of who those belong
Uh-huh.
to
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
tends to kind of elude me a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, I had another question that just came to mind as you were talking. It might come back to me, but I was wondering. This is sort of a deeper question, but I wanted to ask you, what were some of those questions that you first asked real live human beings about their Christianity, then you weren't satisfied with the answers? Because I'd like to have a shot at answering from my perspective. Not that I'm going to change your mind, but just
Sure,
it's
sure.
an exercise for me in case I meet someone that was in your
Yeah,
position, and I could,
yeah.
you know, hopefully come up with something a
Yeah,
little bit better.
so one of them, so there were two. Specifically, there were two. The first one is kind of funny because I actually wouldn't consider it now to be that big of a deal, and that's just the question of like, how is hell just?
Okay.
Um, and essentially, like what I came to I sat down and talked to a priest about this. Even like what I came to was the Bible just doesn't give enough information about hell for us to be able to say a whole lot with certainty, and that uncertainty is where that gray area is kind of where a lot of these issues are able to kind of go and not be worried about, right? Like ended up not really like, because one of the priest specifically mentioned a theory that he had read at one point by a Catholic theologian that when you die, God reveals himself to you and gives you one last choice, right? Completely non-falsifiable. It's not in the Bible, but it makes sense on the principles that we always have something pulling on our ability to make free choices in our mortal forms with traumas and mental issues and all of that. So I was like, all right, like that was the idea that something like that was plausible was enough for me to go, okay, well, I'll shelf that one. The big one that never really got answered, God on two separate occasions in the Old Testament commands a genocide. And one of them, he is very specific to kill every man, woman, child, and infant. And I could not and still cannot fathom how a good and loving God would command men to stab infants in any capacity, right? Like, I can't fathom, an all-powerful God could kill them himself in a painless way that doesn't cause massive psychological trauma. Let alone the questions of an infant's not done anything worth stabbing to death for. So that's the big one that I had and never got a satisfactory answer for.
Okay, forgive me if I didn't listen carefully enough.
Yeah.
Was that you had hell, and then you started talking about the apparent injustices of God in other things like the violence and the massacres and that sort of thing? Was that the first question? Is that all the first question?
No, that's
are those the two questions?
It started as two. It took me a bit to make the connection that the problem I had was justice, and then from there I went to justice and the rest of the Bible. But it started as two questions, like how is hell just and how is genocide
just? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll take a stab at just giving my perspective, not to impress you, but just to practice. Hell is just it's a logical necessity for morality. If there's no hell, there's no morality. Because if, like, for example, if you're an atheist and you think everyone has exactly the same outcome, then the morality goes out the window. You just do whatever you can get away with and just, maximize your pleasure, minimize your pain. That's it. But if you have heaven and hell as the two final outcomes, then your choices do matter, right? Because you're going to end up in one place or the other, and it's going to be determined by your own free will, how you use or abuse your free will. So I believe, because I'm Catholic, I believe that hell is real and that you can go there, and that a lot of people go there, probably a lot more than we'd like to think in terms of percentages. I just got through reading a book called The Fewness of Those Who End Up Going to Heaven or something like that, and it's sobering, it's scary to think about it, but this book said 1 in 1,000 makes it doesn't have to go to hell. So I don't subscribe to that, and the church doesn't commit me to believe one way or the other what the relative percentages are, but we know people are in hell and we know we can go there, and I fear that I'm in danger of going there. Like I'm scared every day that I'm going to end up in hell. Okay. So it's a salutary fear. It's not a perfect love of God that I have. So I'm relying on my fear of hell as a baby step to help me to get serious about virtue, basically, because Christ said, if you love me, keep the commandments. So it's keeping the commandments that's a problem, because I'm a glutton, I'm lazy, I'm horny, and all these sorts of things. So hell is an absolute deal breaker for me. If there's no hell, there's no morality. So that's my answer to the first part. Did you want to respond to that before I go on to the second question?
I mean, I find the if there's no hell, there's no morality interesting, because even in like annihilationism, right, is
it's a cop-out. It's a
still
cop
a,
out.
I mean, you might say it's a cop out, but it is still a response, right? Like it's still a negative outcome that doesn't necessitate eternal conscious torment for temporal crimes against a God that is so omnipotent he can't be hurt anyways, right? Like, uh, but I mean, and I can see why you come to that conclusion. My pushback would be a little bit on the no morality side, but that I would also fear that would get too rabbit traily in a
Yeah,
conversation
yeah, yeah.
into.
But what do you do agree with me though? You must agree with me that if you don't believe in hell, and you don't, then everyone has the same outcome. It doesn't matter how good you are, how bad you are, you're going to have the same outcome, right? You're going to be flower food for a little while, and then the heat death will come on the universe and there'll just be nothing. So there is no difference, and there's no consequence. There's no consequence other than, you know, I chose to be good for goodness sake, and I had a nice day because I made the old lady smile, helped her cross the road, and I did good things, and I got the immediate rewards from that. But you're going to be dead. There's going to be no record of it and no mind there to remember it. So basically, all you've got, if you're an atheist, is I'm just going to do the best with what I've got. You know, I find myself here and I'm just going to seek pleasure. And it could be a sophisticated pleasure, like the Epicureans sought a more sophisticated pleasure than just the stupid meathead getting drunk because it feels good and screwing whores because it feels good and then having diseases and a hangover, whatever. So you can have a more sophisticated approach to maximizing your pleasure like the Epicureans and others had, but it's still the same project. It's still the same project. It's just like, you know, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Like that's basically it.
Yeah. So I'd say that's definitely, I mean, you know, atheism is just lack of belief in God, right? So from there, what people want to do with their like personal philosophy is and ethics is up to them. But generally, yeah, like I can understand your point on that. My contention is that I don't see it getting better in Christianity, right? Like in my opinion, the existence of hell is mutually exclusive with the existence of heaven. Right. So like, I don't know, the example, and I had a conversation of like this recently with some Mormons. The example I would give is if you're a parent and your child doesn't go to heaven, right? All of you die, you realize you're in heaven, your child isn't. And free will is right, we're assuming free will. Part of that's your fault. Your eternal happiness in heaven is robbed of being able to spend it with your child, and it's your fault. Have fun, right? Like I don't see how you can have eternal bliss except for miraculous intervention in which God changes who you are, and at that point you're not in heaven. The form of you that God forces you to be is in heaven, right? Like I can't see how somebody can have free will and hell exists and heaven be heavenly. Right? Just the consequences of knowing people are in hell, the consequences of knowing that you're part of the reason for it, just seems like it would, even if it only momentarily in a single momentary thought, you know, comes to your mind and thus detracts from the joy of heaven, suddenly heaven is no longer the most joyous place, right? It would be more joyous if hell didn't exist.
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, I think that when you are in heaven, and God willing, we'll both make it there and enjoy each
Sure.
other's company forever, and enjoy God forever. But if we make it there, then it's a reality check. You get to see, oh, now I understand how my free will worked, how I used it in a godly way, how I abused it in a satanic way, a selfish way. And the same with everyone that was around me. I see how my husband treated me. I see how my wife treated me. I see how my children treated me and how my parents treated me, whatever. You get to see. God will show you, open your eyes at that point on Judgment Day. Like the good and the bad, those who go to heaven, those who go to hell are going to have their eyes open to a certain extent anyway, to be able to see what God's justice is and what his mercy is, right? So there will be no ambiguity. Right now we're confused. We are in a fallen state. Our intellects are very dim and our wills are very weak. So you're not in a position really to even fantasize about heaven or hell, because you're just drunk, like we're in this drunken stupor here, like we're just idiots here now in this fallen state. But when we're in heaven, or even on judgment day, before we go to heaven or hell, we're going to have God open our eyes, and we're going to understand his justice, his mercy, and everything will make sense. And that's why no one's going to talk back to God and say, yeah, but you should have done this and you shouldn't have done that. No, you will see, everyone will see that God is good, and that we are all deserving of hell, but by the grace of God, he gave us all sufficient grace to be saved. Some of us cooperated with those graces, others didn't. And most of us vacillated back and forth, and we're dancing with the devil and trying to please God, and it's a back and forth battle. But if let's say I end up in heaven and my beloved wife doesn't, I'll be perfectly happy with that, because I can't understand how that will be, but I trust that it will be, because God is perfectly good and just God, and he's going to show me, and there's going to be no doubt, there's going to be no questioning of it, and there's going to be no remorse, and it's just going to be as it should be, because God doesn't make mistakes. Now, if you have a flawed view of God where you think he's a big bully in the sky or something like that, then yeah, you should be scared of that God for sure, and not in the proper way. Like, I fear God to the extent that I do fear God, and I should. I hope to improve my quality of my fear of God, but to the extent that I fear God, it's not a servile fear, but it's supposed to be a filial, son-like fear, where I have a good father and I'm trying to be a good son, and I fear displeasing him. That's the goal. I mean, I'm not there yet, but that is the goal, to try to please God, not to offend God. That's what the fear of God is. And so yeah, there's no servile fear where we fear him as a bully, but the atheists and agnostics might have a perverted picture of God. So their fears are justified. The servile fear is justified, because God is not God for them. God is just a big bully, or an imperfect being. So I know it's hard. I know it's hard to convince someone that God is good, someone that doesn't know that, or that used to know it and has forgotten. Or in your case, I don't know if you ever did truly know in your heart that God is infinitely perfect in every pure perfection. I don't know if you ever came to that understanding in all your reading and all your study and all your experiences, but perhaps you've drifted away, or perhaps you never knew it. I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah, sorry, my lots of thoughts and lots of things I could respond to, but just focus. Yeah, I mean, I like for me, the questions of justice came because I knew, theologically, that God is supposed to be perfect and good.
But did you believe it? Did you believe it? Did you?
Oh, I did, absolutely. And that was what started the questioning, and I realized that I had believed it. Like, I believed that God was good, and thus didn't try to question any of the things that didn't seem good, right, for a really long time. And it was only once I realized that was kind of circular reasoning, I started actually trying to break it down. When I really started looking at the Bible, I would now no longer say that the God of the Bible is good. But I did believe he was good, and then started looking and just found way too many instances that didn't seem good. Genocide is one of them. Hell was, and then again, because there's ambiguity with it, I ended up taking it off the list because there's questions there, right? If there was something that I could ask that I could have a genuine question mark on without it being just ad hoc rationalization, I took it off the list. The genocide state, and then much of the rest of the Old Testament law got added onto it. And
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Can I intervene? or interject. There are a couple famous cases in the Old Testament that were corrected by Jesus. One of them is divorce. Someone asked Jesus about divorce, and he said, "Well, what did Moses say?" And they said, "Well, he permitted divorce." And Jesus said, "Yeah, that was just a concession because you're stiff-necked people." So basically, what does that tell us about the Old Testament God? Like how people like to talk about the Old Testament God is not the same as the New Testament God. Some people like to say that. I disagree, obviously. But what does it tell us? It tells us that there's concessions in the Old Testament that are presented as divinely ordained. They're only permitted by God, but they're presented in the Old Testament as ordained by God. And Jesus Christ comes along in the New Testament and sort of sorts that out to a very tiny extent, but it sets the precedent. And so now we know, okay, so when I read about smashing the baby skulls against the rocks or whatever in the Psalms, for example, or when I read about God hardening the heart of Pharaoh, we have to understand that this is, again, it's warts and all presentation of the development of the understanding of the people of God through their very barbaric trials and tribulations and their stiff-necked rebellion and all these sorts of things. And if you read the saints, if you read for example, St. Augustine, he's really good on this. He really does a good job of sorting out, using pure reason and logic and common sense to say, well, we cannot interpret this on the face of it with its prima facie interpretation. We need to dig deeper because it just cannot be. It cannot be, right? It cannot be that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. It cannot be. Therefore, so what does it mean? It means God allowed Pharaoh's heart to be hardened. And it cannot be that God has an arm and a leg and, body parts. It cannot be. So what does it mean? Well, it means something else. And it cannot be, he goes through many examples like this. So, for example, God's anger. God is not perturbed. He has no anger. I mean, Jesus Christ is human, so he has human nature. So he had anger, like when he turned the tables, these sorts of things. But God, the Father, is pure spirit. He has no anger issues, right? So St. Augustine does a great job of sort of debunking the popular attack on Christianity and on Judaism and on monotheism generally. He does a really good job just using common sense and logic and reason and saying, well, what's first is that we know that God is infinite in every pure perfection and that he's pure spirit and so on and so forth. And therefore, when we read confusing and challenging and upsetting things in the Old Testament or in the New, like I get upset every time I read about the withering of the tree out of season. I get upset about that. But then I have to remind myself that it's there for a reason, right? It's there for a reason. I don't understand it, but it's there for a reason. I've heard homilies on it. I understand the symbolic layers of, spiritual meaning, these sorts of things. And, I'm not that concerned about understanding the Bible per se. What I'm concerned about is understanding Jesus Christ and his church and what the Living Magisterium today is teaching me about how to go to heaven, right? So I don't need to debate 1 Samuel 13:1. That's my favorite, test case in the Bible. When I talk with non-Catholic Christians, I ask them about that. It talks about the age of Saul when he became king. And there are many, manuscripts and discrepancies and theories about what what happened in that particular verse. But my point is that we don't have access to the inerrant Bible here below. We don't have access to it. So what do we have? We have the Living Magisterium, and in a mystical way it's connected to heaven and to Jesus, Mary, and Joseph up in heaven and to the Trinity, and we have the the charism of infallibility in the church, which prevents us from erring concerning faith and morals. So we do have the ability, we do have a church that can teach us infallibly, and that's what it does. That's what I believe. But it doesn't depend on fallible translations of fallible copies of fallible manuscripts, which is where you're at if you're a Protestant and you are your own pope and you're basing your infallible decisions on a very, very fallible set of documents. So just to let you know how I operate, how I think in terms of infallibility in my religion and in terms of the Bible, in terms of tradition, and in terms of unraveling all the complications and all the things that are challenging.
Sure.
It's not an issue for me because I just my main goal is for me to get to heaven and those around me, if I can help them in some way. And so I'm listening to the church about how to do that. And very, very, very little of that depends on how to interpret specific verses in the Bible.
Yeah. for me, that kind of leads to a question, though, right? So we see in the Bible instances, right, in which like God hardens Pharaoh's heart,
Yeah,
God commands, the murder of infants.
yeah,
God, in His law code, permits things like slavery and rape and um, things, that are really, really kind of awful and seem really, really awful. And we also have passages that talk about Him being all good and being all powerful, right? These sorts of things. And so it seems to me when we then approach the Bible and we have both of these, we have to make a decision about which ones we're going to trust, right? Because we are dealing with like fallible translations here.
yeah,
And so it seems to me that if that's the route that we want to go down, um, it could also be the case, right, that the passages that were meant to be more accurate are the brutal ones, and that the infallibility ones are biblical, the manuscript writers, like as apologists coming later to try and make it more appealing, and that, therefore the very foundation is problematic, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm curious how you would say we would go about, like, if that were the case, right?
Yeah.
If God were capricious trickster God who had no qualms with commanding murder and rape, then how do we know that, right? Like how would we know that we are basing our faith on the right verses that we're taking seriously?
Yeah, well, I just got through telling you that I don't pay a lot of heed to the Bible in
Sure.
terms of grounding myself. Okay, it's a supplement. It's just a supplement for me. It is, it is the source and summit of my faith in a lot of ways, because I have a mystical church. Like the church is the mystical body of Christ, and so the church shares to a small degree in the infallibility of Christ, and in very well defined ways. And so I really don't need to worry about it. But you know what Saint Augustine said, is one of my favorite saints and one of my favorite philosophers. What he said is Christians don't need the Bible, right? And well, first of all, he said I wouldn't even believe in the Bible were it not for the authority of the Catholic Church. So that's step one. Step two is he said, but we don't even need it. What we need is faith, hope, and love, right? And as St. Paul said, love is the most important. The other two are going to fade away. We won't have faith or hope in heaven, but we're going to have love. So really, my Christianity is a lot more akin to Buddhism or some sort of Eastern thing, where it's a mystical thing. I'm a creature, God is God, and I know with absolute certainty based on metaphysics that there's one and only one uncaused first cause who is infinite in every pure perfection. There are a posteriori proofs that prove that, like if you're familiar with Blessed John Duns Scotus, he does a good job. St. Thomas, I think, took a stab at the same sort of a posteriori proof. But the point is, we can know with certainty, without recourse to any faith-based beliefs whatsoever, that the God of monotheism is true. And I hope to talk to you again so we can talk through this. And I can bring you closer to that. This is probably not the right time to do that. But that's the basis of my faith. And I'm sort of a monist in many ways, where I believe that God is everything, I am nothing. And so it's sort of like a personal journey. I came to God through hard solipsism, where I was the only being, no body, no other, no universe, and I was just a disembodied mind. I was the God of Buddhism, basically. That's what I thought. I falsely thought. I was wrong. Okay, I was wrong. It's a wrong worldview. It's a false religion, hard solipsism. But that's where I was at, because I'm very sensitive, and just studying philosophy as an amateur, I fell into every rabbit hole, and I ended up there. But it was actually Rene Descartes who brought me out, ironically, because he was speaking about the evil demon, which is kind of funny because you were mentioning that, like, how can we know? And the way that Descartes pulled me out of my hard solipsism was just with a shrug of the shoulders. He said, well, obviously, God is not an evil demon. He's all good. And, it was not a formal proof by any stretch. But that when I read that, I'm like, oh, thank God, that I'm not the only being, and I was back into reality, because I came, it's radical doubt. That's the approach that Descartes uses for his physics, his science, to doubt everything that we can doubt, and we're left with I am. It's, if you try to doubt that you are, you're affirming that you are, therefore you are, right? But we can't trust our senses and all this sort of stuff. So, that's how you get into hard solipsism and by that radical doubt. But it also it will lead you to God if you take your hard solipsism seriously. I trust that you won't remain there, because it's a very nasty place to be. It's kind of like nihilism light, but it's pretty dark.
Well, and I have to say that I at the end, really at the when I came to the final crossroads with my deconstruction, it was kind of the point where I was like, all right, either I'm taking this kind of the scientific route and saying I'm going to remain skeptical unless I'm presented with convincing evidence, or I'm going to go with the mystical route, where I don't need the evidence, I don't need the Bible in order to have that relationship with God. I went the skeptical route, but I also super respect people who went the mystical route, right? I deal with a lot of Christians all the time who are so, especially here in Texas, right, who are so caught up in the infallibility of the Bible that they are willing to defend things that are, in some cases, just really horrible things. In some cases, just really dumb, right? That are basic arguments, and it gets frustrating. So but I have a lot of respect for the people who are yes, yep. There are definitely issues here if this is all you try and take. There's definitely, good points here. And I went the mystical route because I went the other way, the skeptical route.
Yeah, well, like I told you, I came to God through skepticism, so I don't think
Sure,
it's a bad route. I don't think it's a bad route. I actually think it's a faster route and a more reliable route. I think that skepticism, I did a whole series, well, not a series on it, but a whole video on doubt. It's called Doubt, Faith, and Reason, how the three work together. And Blaise Pascal even talked about that. I found out after I started working on my idea for the video, and then I discovered that Blaise Pascal talked about the same thing, that doubt is an essential component. Because otherwise, what is it? It's going to be fideism, or it's going to be something else. So, or agnosticism, or whatever. So, it's really interesting, the faith and reason thing, the tension that's there, and the compatibility that I absolutely have to have. It's a deal breaker for me. A lot of the Muslim theologians are willing to work with the two truth theory, where there's there can be a philosophical truth and a theological truth that contradict each other in a genuine way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not into that. I'd rather be a nihilist. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't gonna buy that.
Yeah. No, and you and I are of like mind on that, right?
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that, and I think you're right. I think skepticism is, first, I think it's the best way to find, the fastest way to find any truth, right? Even just a day-to-day thing, having a skeptical attitude of just checking things is a great way to actually find truth.
Well, the word proof is a test. The word proof is to test.
Yeah.
It's to prod, or to it's not like, oh, I'm complacent and I've got it all figured out. Boom. That's not what a proof is.
Yeah.
That's not a proof. A proof is a challenge. That's what a proof is.
Yeah, somebody at one point, I can't even remember who it was, but the quote's always stuck with me. Somebody said the truth stands up to scrutiny, right? And that axiom has always stuck with me. If I'm scared to scrutinize something I hold to be true, is that because I'm afraid it's not true? And if so, that's probably the thing I most need to start scrutinizing.
Yeah, exactly. That's at the heart and soul of my apologetics technique, if you want to call it that. Why do I ask my guests right away, who are you? Where do you come from? What do you believe? And why do you believe it? That's how I used to phrase my opening question to all my guests. But it's the same thing I'm after with everyone. Tell me about yourself. How do you think? How do you see the world? And what do you believe? And why do you believe it? And we shouldn't be surprised to find out that people, especially a young man like yourself, a bright young man like yourself, we shouldn't be surprised or disappointed to meet a bright young man and to discover that they're on a journey. I should not be disappointed that you haven't arrived. I should not be disappointed that you're not like a stuffy, stodgy old man who thinks you have all the answers. That's not an interesting guest. First of all, it's not an interesting.
Right.
It's not fun talking to those people. They have all the answers, and no, won't question that. No. We are on a journey. I'm on a journey. You're on a journey. I'm very confident about a certain set of core truths for my worldview, and I'm happy to be challenged if there, I don't want to believe a lie. So like, I mean, if you see something that I say or think that's clearly wrong, or that you think is wrong, yeah, challenge me for sure. You'll be doing me a favor. You'll be doing us both a favor, and whatever few listeners I have on my podcast. So it's that Socratic method. It's that's
yes.
what I love.
Oh, yep. Oh, so yeah. Very much down for the Socratic
There's nothing better. And I'm a freedom fighter. I want to be able to question the Holocaust. I don't question it, but I want to be able to.
Sure.
I want to be able to. And I'm kind of worried about, like, why can't I? It kind of makes me want to question it, but I don't question it, right? But I kind of want to, because they don't want me to talk about it. If the right-wing conspiracy theorists, if they're correct, because they're making a big stink about the Jews and the Holocaust and all this sort of stuff, and there seems to be a lot of pushback, and it seems to be like classified as hate speech and all this sort of thing. I don't think it should be. I think we should all relax. We should relax and just say, okay, other than just wasting time reinventing the wheel, like, oh, prove to me that 1 + 1 = 2. Well, Bertrand Russell did a big book on that. And you could say it's a waste of time, then just don't read it, But I mean, if it comes down to where we're spending our tax dollars, maybe that's a different question, a more political question. But when it comes to the marketplace of ideas, I want everyone to be able to challenge each other, right? Like, even, if you believe in flat Earth, or if you believe in that the Queen is a lizard person that eats babies or whatever, just try to present me with your best case. But I don't like stifling free thought. I want us all to feel free to have a controversial opinion. Why not? Not just for the sake of it, but if you actually have stumbled upon this idea and you, for some reason, you're compelled to believe it, or you think there might be good reason to believe it, why should you be shamed or bullied or whatever? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I'll take that line of logic one step further to one of the things that became a big pet peeve of mine in this whole process, and that is, I also don't think scholarship should be hidden behind a paywall, right? Like, the fact that we have scholars, scientists, experts telling us that X and X is right or wrong, and we can't question it. And by the way, it's going to cost you X amount of money if you want to even see how I came to that conclusion. Again, no, I'm absolutely all. In fact, I think that if we had more availability to things like that, we'd have less of these conspiracy theories, because, well, how do we know that the Holocaust is there? Go check, right? The scholars who have written papers, like, if you have access to those papers, you can go see their methodology. You can see what evidence they used. You can go and find it yourself again if you would like, or if that's not there, right? If the person who did the study really did a terrible job, you can see that too. But yeah, that free access to ideas, open scholarship, like, those are things I think would make everyone's lives just better,
Yeah. There's a key concept I want to bounce off of you. It's the concept of corruption. Okay, it's not necessarily a Christian concept, although I feel it is at the heart of the fall of man, but you can, even secular people can relate to the corruption that's, most obviously illustrated, I guess, in something like a mafia, organized crime, collusion between government, big business, these sorts of things. Like, there's so many popular big budget films that are made about corruption, and they're entertaining and whatever, and they reveal a lot of the tricks, actually, that are used to keep the rich getting richer and to keep the poor ignorant, and these sorts of things. So it's a big, it's a big part of war. It's a big part of business. It's a big part of advertising. It's a big part of, sex, drugs, rock and roll, you name it, education, everything. Journalism, oh my God, it's pathetic
Oh, yeah.
thinking about journalism.
Yeah.
That's depressing thinking about journalism in 2023. But I want to get your gut check on that. Like, how do you sleep at night knowing that, a lot of people are really good and they have good intentions, but a lot of people will stab their grandmother in the back for $10 kind of thing. Like, the corruption is maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but there are people that are willing to poison the village down the river to make $10 million. That's for sure.
There's people who are willing to not install like really basic updated brake systems, and the fact that a train then crashes and spills chemicals and destroys a town. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it is. I've been really considering that. So my theological studies have taken a little bit more of a backseat recently, other than preparing for debates, just because I've delved so deeply into it that it's like it's still there, but and I've been looking a little more into like the political situation, right? And I mean, you want to talk about corruption, like it's not even hidden anymore, especially in America. It was the craziest thing. I was in Cancun just a week or two ago, met a couple people from the Netherlands, and we were talking to them about the situation over here, and they were like, yeah, our politicians really aren't corrupt. Like, there might be some minor corruption. And I was like, how can you even say that? Like, it's so bad here that they brag about it. Yeah. So how do I sleep at night? I don't. That's. I mean, I am utterly convinced on a political sphere that the corruption in America is so bad that it can't be fixed without violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that the corruption has influenced the main players who would enact that violence. So then the new system would continue it on a more like academic level, right? Because the corruption then infiltrates into the academics. This is one of the reasons why I really, really wish that we had more open access to scholarship, right? Like I've been able to weasel my way into some scholarship that as a layperson you usually can't. But yeah, because you definitely have people who are making money to say of specific so I live right down the street from Dallas Theological Seminary, right? It's kind of one of the bigger Protestant seminaries that has research that they publish. Every one of those professors has to sign a statement of faith with a very strict and detailed list of things that they are or are not allowed to believe.
Okay.
I mean, how can you have pure scholarship if even questioning one path gets you fired? You lose your job, right? Mike Licona had that happen to him, one of the Protestant apologists, where he was fired because he dared to say that he thought maybe the dead coming out of the tombs and walking into Jerusalem wasn't meant to be a literal thing. So the nice thing with scholarship is that you can at least go back and check their work.
Can I say something? Can I say something about that? What you just said about the commitment to faith, or what was it called, where you sign off?
Yeah, the statement of faith.
Yeah, the statement of faith. Okay, I disagree a little bit, because I think that if you, for example, to use a less controversial, or maybe a more controversial, but an example that's separate from religion, maybe it's not actually, I'm not sure. But anyway, if we were to use the vegans as an example, I always use them as my example as a substitute for religion, but maybe it is a religion, I don't know. But in any case, if you are claiming to be a vegan club or a vegan school, we're 100% vegan, all of our staff is vegan, I think that's okay. Go ahead and do that. I'm not vegan, but I would support your right to do your vegan thing and even have a school and all your teachers are vegan. I don't have a problem with that. But the problem I have is with hypocrites who are claiming to be vegan while they're not only shoving food down their own gullet, but they're promoting food and selling food, meat. They're hypocrites because they're claiming to be vegan, but they're promoting meat and making money off meat and eating meat and feeding everyone meat. It's just like, no, you're not a vegan. Sorry, you're not a vegan, so you can't be part of the vegan club. Sorry. So it's the same thing with my Catholicism. Like, I'm happy you came into the church, and I'm happy that you left. What would be horrible is if you stayed and tried to just infiltrate. I don't want you in my church until you can sign on to the statement of faith like that. I'm 100% on board with that, just like I would be for the vegans or the Satanists. I think the Satanists could do the same thing.
Well, and to clarify, right? Like, I 100% agree with that in certain circumstances. Like, if like specifically, if you're talking about like just people who are teaching, sure. My bigger issue is that some of these universities are research centers in which they are claiming that what they are doing is searching every avenue to find the truth. And also conveniently, the truth happens to agree with my statement of faith every time, right? Like that's my issue is you can't, if you're claiming that you are in an honest pursuit of truth, but you'll lose your job if you, in an honest search for truth,
I understand.
Come up with a different answer.
I understand. So if you're publishing, if the vegan school has a nutritionist department and they're publishing their research and it always promotes veganism, it seems suspicious. But then you've got the omnivore school doing the same thing. They're always pushing the benefits of that. And like everyone's going to push their own thing. I wouldn't have a problem with that as long as I knew, like, oh, there go the vegans again pushing their vegan stuff, and their vegan research always gives vegan results, and the meat lovers research always gives meat lovers results. I wouldn't have a problem with that because you know what you're getting. What I don't like is the subterfuge and the lies. Like, just be consistent. And if you have a bias, like everyone has a bias, but if you have like a strong bias and you're going to try to spin everything to fit your narrative, I don't have a problem with that as long as I know that's what you're doing. Right. And as long as it's free market where it's not just the whole world's run by vegans and I can't stray from that. Like, I want to be able to stray from whatever. I often say, even if the Catholic Church took over and everyone was Catholic and you had to be Catholic, I would be uncomfortable. I would probably not be Catholic because and I don't want to get in trouble, but with the recent thing we went through in the past 3 years, I went the other direction because I'm a nonconformist. I don't buy into a monolithic consensus in the sciences and the experts. There's no consensus. Sorry. So if the whole world went Catholic, I'd be like, hey, suddenly I'm not Catholic because this is creepy as fuck. Excuse my language. Very creepy. Very creepy. You know?
No, and that's totally fair. I absolutely get that. And that's, and that's where, like I wish, you're right. I wish it was easier to see biases and all that. Like, one of the things I've found in researching and prepping for my debates is that the very first step of research is not reading the articles. It's researching the people who wrote them. Like, you have to do the research on who wrote it because, there's so much of that, especially when you get into theology, philosophy, anything that's like really dear to someone, right? Like, the chance that the person that you're reading has no idea, no credentials, is in no way trustworthy, goes up exponentially. And it just makes it like a little minefield you have to walk through where you can cite a study and you think you have facts in your corner, and then somebody looks at it and goes, oh yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, he's full of it. He has no idea what he's talking about.
Well, remember James Lindsay did that mock paper, or the series of mock papers. Do you remember that? Where he published BS and it got approved and peer reviewed or whatever. He and a partner did that. I don't know how many times they did that, but they got away with it. And I'm sorry to say it, but that proves there's a problem. We have a problem. We have a problem for sure.
Well, and goodness, then it gets even better. Like, I have a friend who's Protestant, but he's like lead translator of a team of translators working through Wycliffe. Like, really smart guy, really knows his stuff. And he and I were talking recently about the Abal tablet. I don't know if you saw that, because it was finally like they had found a small curse tablet on Mount Abal, and it has Proto-Hebrew, and it's from an area that is very clearly like from around the time of Joshua, right? And that was the story. And that was what we were told. And we were told it says like curse, curse, curse. It uses Yahweh and
El-
El together, right?
Uh-huh.
Which would bring into question parts of like documentary
Uh-huh.
hypothesis.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then the story, more recently, we've started getting more of the details because he submitted it for peer review. And first of all, he submitted for peer review to a journal that's all about metallurgy and is in no way about epigraphy and hardly ever about archaeology, you know. And that's weird, right? Like it got peer reviewed, cool, but it was peer reviewed by people who don't know anything about goodness, about writing. And you know, they don't know Proto-Hebrew, they don't know any of that. And then we started seeing scans, you know, the pictures, and I don't see any writing on that. And then we start getting more of the story, and oh, we don't even know what layer it was from. It was like sifted. I mean, in a second, I'm gonna have to
Your
go
dog?
get the door real quick, but like it was sifted out of somebody else's archaeological dig, right? They had dug up a bunch of dirt, and we're like, this isn't part of the layer we want, and they sifted through that, but we have no idea what layer that is. That could have been
You
like
need
the
to
top
tend to your
layer.
dog. You need to get your dog.
Yes, yeah. Give me just a
Yeah,
second.
no problem. No problem. So I guess this is a good time to, I'm going to wrap it up soon, but I'm going to give a shout out to my friends in the live chat. First in was M88. Always nice to see you, M. Hope you come back again on the live stream to chat with me. And my friend Daniel Drazinovich is there. Nice to see you, as always, my friend. And Christopher Rice showed up. Hey, nice to see you. Christopher Rice drinking some tea. That's cool. So yeah, nice to see all of you, and he's back already. I was just saying hi to my friends in the live chat there. So
Oh, nice.
I'm gonna hook you up with Kev Non-Trad Cat, okay? And
Okay.
do you have a podcast, and do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have a place where you write, or what do you do online?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel.
I couldn't find it.
I currently don't have any videos on it. I
Okay.
have like 5. Well, because like it's going to be the home of the debates that I've been doing
Okay.
with the Goody Center,
Okay.
and various response videos kind of connected to that. And I have other content that I'm planning. I actually have a couple of Mormon missionaries that I'm planning to talk to.
Oh, no way.
And it'll be a recorded thing as part of a series that I'm wanting to start doing, comparing some of the experiential sides of religions, because I find that there's often very similar stories without the people on either side interacting much with each other. So I think it'll be a cool opportunity to maybe bring some attention to, or just bring some attention to different faith traditions and how they experience their faith traditions.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I have plans for it. It just currently has nothing. It should within the next couple of days.
Oh, that's pretty cool. It's exciting. Do you know Nathan Ormond? He's a philosophy guy and a computer science guy, I think. But he was Protestant Christian at one point. But then, and I interviewed him when he was Protestant, and then he became sort of agnostic or atheist or something like that. And he's a bright guy, a nice young man. I think I annoy him because I did a rebuttal of one of his videos where he was sort of having fun making fun of proofs for the existence of God, and I guess I just annoyed him because he didn't have a good reaction to it. But anyway, I like the guy, but bright young man. But maybe I'll hook you up with him too, because he seems like he's a little bit like you. I think he's a little bit edgier than you are. You seem more gentle. But
Love it.
I like your approach. And I like your vibe.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
By the way, in the chat real quick, I'm going to drop the link to the YouTube channel. So if anyone is interested, since it will have videos soon, I promise.
Yeah. Drop that in the chat. Okay. You drop that into my chat here. So I'm going to shave that. I'm going to share that. I'm going to share that in the description of the video. Okay. So
one of the things that's made editing videos very difficult. I'm very much a pen and paper guy, and learning how to work with videos has been a fun one. But there'll be things, I promise.
Well, I used to do audio only interviews and I edited them, and it was very time consuming. It was also very interesting because I got to hear myself and notice patterns in how I think and how I talk. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing discovering yourself in that way, but it was a
Yep.
good exercise. But then finally I said, you know what? I'm tired of this and I'm just going to go live, warts and all, and with the stammering, stuttering, and just being awkward. And I don't care. I'm done with editing. So I started going live. And so I'm getting a little bit smoother. Like I'm not quite as retarded as I used to be when it comes to talking. So I'm still very casual about it, but you know, it was pretty bad when I first started 6 years ago doing this, right? So
Sure.
so if you did end up doing live streams, you could just do one a day and there's no overhead, there's no homework. You just stream and
Sure.
it's done, warts and all. Like
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of people who used to do very detailed scripted, 15-minute videos are now releasing 3 or 4 live streams in the same amount of time. It's been really nice to get all that extra exposure with them. So yeah, and that is my intention. I intend to move to something like that. I just want to get a few of the debates out first,
uh,
since that's one of the like fundamental like starting points. Like I'm gonna reference them. It's gonna happen. I debated a like geocentrist at one point,
okay, who was that?
and goodness, I don't remember his
Wasn't
name off the top of my
Singenis?
head.
Robert Singenis?
Yep.
Was it?
Yep.
No way.
Uh,
He's a big
through the
name.
Colby Center, yeah.
Oh, you should hook me up. I'd love to interview Robert Singenis. Because
I
I am a young Earth creationist and I'm, you know, a de facto geocentrist. Like I want to be a geocentrist. I'm not quite there yet, but I want to be. You know, I did study physics. I worked at the Canadian Space Agency, so you know I've got some problems with geocentrism that seem insurmountable.
sure,
But you know, there's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, and you know, I just need someone to give me a good reason, first of all, to believe
sure.
that, and then some workarounds for the physics. And you know, I'm not gonna go to flat Earth or the you know the what do they call that hard dome with the
Yeah.
firmament or whatever. I'm not gonna go that
Yes,
far.
yes, something like that.
Like I'm not planning on going that far. It doesn't appeal to me, you know. But pretty sure the
Sure,
Earth is a globe. But whatever, you know. No offense to any flat Earthers out there. But
sure.
they do seem like they're full of it does seem like sort of like a demonic cult, you know, the flat earth sort of movement, like a lot of just hate,
It gets
just
weird.
paranoid weird stuff, and just logic's out the window. And
Yeah, yeah.
so that doesn't appeal to me,
Uh,
but geocentrism does appeal to me. And there were some pretty bright minds back in the day who subscribed to it, had just come up with a different
Absolutely.
model.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I'm gonna want to reference that one, and I'm currently working on an hour-long response to 4 challenges that Hugh Owen submitted to me that
Oh,
he
ah,
I don't want to debate because I don't find any of them interesting, but he insists that they must be answered before we move forward with our
okay,
debates.
okay,
So I'm putting that together, and that's probably going to be just because of how time consuming it's been. That'll be the first thing I drop.
yep.
And then after that, I hope to be able to throw in the debates really, really easily. The first 2 are going to be the hardest because I'm going to want to add sources. I got better at doing that ahead of time with the next ones. And then after that, yeah, I'll be able to do content like live streams just so much easier once I have the things I'm working on right now up.
Would you like to do what I do? Like, cause I interview all kinds of people. Like I interviewed Aaron Rod, you know him, the big evolution
Oh,
guy.
absolutely. Oh, I'm jealous.
I
That's
did Kent
fantastic.
Hovind too. I did Kent Hovind.
No way.
Yeah,
That's
amazing.
uh
He's a
send me
character.
the link
He's a
to that,
character.
please.
Yeah. He's a character. But they're both very big characters. Both those guys are
Yeah, oh yeah.
huge characters.
Oh yeah.
And you know, it's not so much that they're famous; it's that they are characters. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Personality,
Oh
stubborn,
yes.
headstrong, and you know, they're both warm, lovable. I like them both. A lot of people hate on one or the other, but I like them both.
Sure. Sure. Um yeah, their characters is the best way to describe them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've definitely gotten the feeling from both of them that, if you're on their side, they're great
Oh
people.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And if you're not on their side, just run. You're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yep,
Amazing. It's amazing. You know, I also introduce or interview just regular people, normal people or whatever. And it's always surprising, you know, it's always first of all, there's the chemistry thing. Like, do I like your face? Do I like watching you talk? Like that chemistry thing. Usually, you know, it's very rare where a guest will bother me. Like, it's like, I don't like your face and I don't like how you talk.
yep,
It has happened. So number one, there's that chemistry thing. That's interesting. And then number two, it's the discovery, like, this is a human being. It's like infinitely complex and
yep,
surprising. And, you know, you'll ask a question and you kind of have an idea what the answer is going to be. And it's like, nope. It's like,
sure,
wow, what a surprise. What an interesting voyage going into someone's mind. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
So that's the most exciting thing about this podcast. It's not about bashing someone over the head with Christianity, like, no, I'm right and you're wrong. It's not about that. It's
Sure,
never been
sure.
about that for me. It's about discovering and exploring ideas and just chatting. Because in my real life, no one wants to talk about religion and philosophy. They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
You
I've
did you
had the
notice
same
that?
experience. Absolutely. Um,
Roman
and
history. How many of your friends want to talk about Roman history?
oh, right, it's the worst. I don't get invited to parties anymore. They're tired of my Roman history party tricks. Yeah, no, and worse, like even when I do find a few that are down for it, they're never down for it for as long as I'm down for it.
Yeah.
So, or as often as I'm down for it. So
Yeah.
I end up having to find multiple sources
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
talk to. 'Cause otherwise, I just start losing friends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's it's ironic because the reason I do the podcast is because my wife said, "Listen, David, everyone's sick of you asking these philosophical questions at the parties. Why don't you go and actually talk to people, find people on the internet, and
yeah,
ask them these questions?" I'm like, "Hey, that's a good idea."
yep,
So that's
yep,
that's how it started.
yep.
So it's an amazing
Yeah,
resource that we have, the internet.
absolutely. Yeah, and after teaching for as long as after teaching, after everything else, and with all of my questioning, like I don't know, I don't want to be like the Dead Sea, right, where there's no outlet, so it just becomes like my
Uh,
information and everything just becomes
uh,
salty and just
yeah.
awful, right? Like I want to be able to have an outlet and still be challenged. So that's why YouTube channel is up and coming because it's an outlet. I can talk about all these things.
Yeah, well, they talk about water, stagnant waters, and how it stinks, and just it has to be flowing. The water needs to be flowing. So,
Yep,
did
absolutely.
you end up finding yourself a wife?
No, no. Actually, it's
Because I see a shadow. I see a shadow moving in the background.
yes, yes. Girlfriend, not wife.
Uh,
I find after my last experience that I'm like I don't feel like I had commitment issues. I
okay.
feel like I might now. The classic like guy issue, right? So
Uh,
there's definitely some of those to work through, but
I'll be praying
you know,
for you. I'll be praying for you to soften your heart, so
I appreciate it.
so that your poor girlfriend can get commitment from you. And I'm gonna also ask you to book an interview and come and talk to me. I want to hear her side of the story about
I
religion and philosophy.
I would love to get her to do that. She's a little camera shy. Because I've even been trying to get her to just be like, "Hey, you want to come and be like the everyman on my stuff?" And she's like, "No." So one step at a time. I'll get her on mine, and then we'll kick her over to yours.
Well, my friend Christopher Rice is in the live chat, and I think he's one of the first where I hounded him to get his wife to come on, and she actually said yes. So I'm going to interview her on Sunday. So I'm really
Oh,
excited because
nice.
I always ask, and if it's a woman, I ask, can I talk to your husband? You know, because it's you're not married or whatever, but it's still someone that can
Yeah,
reflect you to a certain extent, and it fills out the picture. Like, oh, really? He was with her? What? That doesn't make sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it
You
makes
can,
sense, but if you saw me and my wife, you'd be like, "Well, that doesn't make sense."
no, that's fair. Yeah,
But it's fascinating.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So I'll let you go. I see you got things to do there, and I've got to get back to my wife. But it was a real pleasure meeting you. And will you please come back and talk to me again?
Oh, absolutely. It would be my pleasure.
Excellent.
Give your wife my thanks for letting me steal you for a little bit.
Yeah,
It's been great, and I look forward to our next conversation.
excellent. Thank you so much. I'll send you an email right after this with some contacts.
Perfect. I
Okay, my
appreciate it. Thank
brother.
you.
Take good care.
You too. Thanks.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye.